Hey guys, what's going on? This is Roth. I am here with Eric. Welcome to our Game of Thrones show, Dragons on the Wall. Slightly different name, same show, now with dragons.
Because dragons make everything better, right?
Dragons do make everything better,
Yeah.
but I may get distracted thinking about dragons here and there. Especially this
It's a
beautiful,
problem.
it is an issue. This dragon's got grayscale, which is a little sad for it. Let's dive in here to this episode. Episode 3 of season 5, Hi Sparrow,
Yep.
in which we meet Jonathan Pryce. Highlights for you of the episode. Did you like it? How did you feel that it measured up against the first couple of the season?
I did like it. I mean, I think for whatever reason, the thing that jumps out to me the most is kind of the realization that Sansa is intended to be with Ramsay because holy crap, Sansa, get away from that situation.
That is a big moment. I want to talk about that. My overall impression was, wow, we haven't had much nakedness and sex and brotheling this season. I'm glad we've made up for that.
Yeah.
There was plenty of that to go around all across.
There was brothels in every corner of the land.
Every corner of the land. But let's talk about that because I think that was probably a pretty shocking moment for a lot of viewers.
Yeah.
Not the nakedness, the Sansa and Ramsay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where her character is right now that she would agree to that.
I mean, first and foremost, though, of course, we should say none of the characters realize what a monster he is.
No.
You know, he has managed to kind of hide that side of himself.
And I think that they really want us to know that because they give Littlefinger that line of like, I know very little about you. That's odd for a lord. And they give us a reason why he doesn't know.
Right. And because we know enough to know Littlefinger would not give Sansa over to a guy as horrible as Ramsay at this point.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, his own creepy fascination with Sansa would not let him do that. But, of course, he is a player and schemer in the Game of Thrones. And so, again, it's all positioning and titles and the fact that this would be a good arrangement to sort of further everything and further his position, further Sansa's position. So, yeah, I think her going along with it is simply, as we've talked about, her now actively playing the game. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she can't sort of go back to what her old life was by being Sansa Stark, you know, the daughter of the Lord of Winterfell, but this is another way in, you know, to rise up.
Yeah, this is an avenue in, and it's a really bitter pill for her to swallow. Mm-hmm. I did love the sort of moment where she stops
when the two of them are standing there.
And when, you know, you can tell everything that she's thinking about him. And I think she doesn't mind that he knows.
No.
And then it smiles in courtesy because it's all a charade, you know, and it's charade. And it's like she and Littlefinger have made this agreement, like, look, no longer be a bystander to tragedy because the fact is, and you've learned it by now, tragedy is going to happen.
Yeah, because you're on Game of Thrones.
Because you're on Game of Thrones, and that's how we roll. But if you can take agency in your own life, if you can be active in making these choices, if you can decide that you're going to do this, not because you're forced into it, but because you know 10 steps from now that you're going to slit this guy's throat and everything's going to be okay again, it may not be literally that, I sort of hope it is, then let's work the steps to get to that point where you can have your revenge.
Yeah.
But let's do it in a way that's smart and realistic.
The long con.
Let's play the long con, and he's really playing the very long con here because, you know, even the point that he makes to Bolton is like, you think that we're powerless against the crown, against the Lannisters, but look at what a small group of people and a small team up between the North and the Arya did before.
Yeah. Even you know, once we said, look, once they revealed that he was behind the murder of Jon Arryn that began the series, it's like the long con thing. It's like, this is a guy who really wants to rise in power but knows better than to try everything at once in a world where that can get you killed very quickly. And so, yeah, and he obviously, every single thing hasn't worked out the way he wants it to, but a lot has because he's moved slowly. Yeah. And, you know, made his moves very deliberately.
And obviously he is, as we've seen, still communicating with Cersei, and he's, you know, playing that game as well. You know, she certainly doesn't know where he is or what he's up to.
Yeah.
But that'll be interesting to see him try and play navigate those waters heading back
Yeah,
to
yeah.
King's Landing. It's a big move.
It
it's
is.
a huge, huge, huge event in the series for that character and for everybody.
Yeah.
So a fascinating part of the show. Let's talk about Tyrion a little bit. Speaking of whores, he's not the whore.
Speaking of whores, that's a transition you can use so much talking about Game of Thrones, though. That's the great
We
thing.
weren't speaking of whores. I mean, just to clarify, I don't think that Sansa is a whore at all.
Littlefinger is.
Littlefinger, however, we have our questions about.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the big thing, kind of cutting to the chase, there is Jorah, them coming across each other, which didn't end up so well for Tyrion, but because, again, Dany has been so separated from the other characters, you know, and obviously Sir Barristan, him coming over was the first time that it was like, oh, someone from the Winterfell world, not Winterfell, the Westeros world has come here. So now, you know, we're excited about the idea of Tyrion and Dany meeting. If we get that or not this season, at least Jorah, who's now been ostracized, but obviously is this huge connection to Dany.
Yeah.
Him finding Tyrion's a big deal, you know, to bring those two stories together.
It is, and I think that they set up some interesting groundwork prior to that. I mean, I did find it fascinating that Tyrion could not sort of see it through with the actual whore. Because that says a lot about where he's at psychologically and the depth of the wound of the betrayal that he just experienced.
Yeah, yeah. He's got bad whore memories.
He does have bad whore memories.
Yeah. His daddy whore issues
his daddy whore
deep.
issues, they run it deep. But but Jorah too, it's interesting because if you see like the ladies dressed up as Dany running around.
Right.
I don't think he liked that very much.
No.
I think he had some pretty mixed feelings about that. But he saw an opportunity, you know, and Varys was right. Don't get out of here like you're hidden. You're so...
no, sorry, finish your thought.
No, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that the Dany horror reminded me, though, this was actually interesting because we were seeing in many different ways how Dany's legend is growing.
Sure.
And it can be fetishized, like having a prostitute dressed like her in that sort of iconic blue dress, or it can be just someone preaching about her, you know, and actually literally talking about her and what she represents.
The follower of the Lord of Light.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Who saw Tyrion.
Right. Because in Westeros, we do get these mentions of Dany here and there, but now that, you know, Tyrion has traveled closer to her, but not all the way, you're kind of seeing that this...
How her legend emerges. And of course it is. I mean, think about, for all of the obvious reason, her legend is growing larger and larger.
She's got dragons.
She's got dragons.
Yeah.
But it's getting almost larger than, like her dragons. I just thought of this analogy now.
Yeah.
But like her dragons, it's getting too big for her to control.
Sure.
You know, it's unmanageable at this point and probably pretty dangerous even to her, you know. That's interesting. What a point, Eric.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But yeah, he sees an opportunity to maybe try and get in her good graces. She's not the forgiving sort, as we know. So that's an interesting setup for both of them.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about other people who aren't forgiving, though, which is Cersei. And let's talk about her and Marjorie, because some interesting stuff's going on there.
I was just saying to you,
The young man caught in the middle.
The young man caught just where he'd like to be right now. I would like to do this forever and ever. And
yes,
ever.
yes.
Let's talk about that. I don't know where to go first. Let's first talk about the sex, and we'll talk about the girl fight next.
Well, okay, look, let's just get out of the way that it's weird and funny because we've got an actor who in real life is 17 now, might have been 16 when he was shooting this, with Natalie Dormer, who's 33 now, might have been 32 when she saw this. It just couldn't have been the worst day for him. I'm just saying.
It was. I felt like
get in bed with naked Natalie Dormer.
That was some method acting going on there. That was some method acting.
He's like, I just want to shoot this scene forever
and ever. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm glad in this particular case is one of the cases that I'm really glad that they have aged the characters.
Right.
Because
and they don't say Marjorie's age at all, by the way.
They don't
I just said the
say it.
actress' age, but it's like Marjorie could be. I think no matter what, she's supposed to be older than him.
Yeah.
But Natalie Dormer looks like she could pass for 25 anyway. So
I found their bedroom scene last season horrifically disturbing and upsetting, and just really, really gross with like little Sir Pounds By the way, that Sir Pounce is like
Does
the
not
most
return this season.
extraordinary cat in the universe because he survived Joffrey,
Yeah.
who you would think was repeatedly trying to kill him.
Sir Pounce had like 10 siblings that did not make it.
That did not make it,
Yeah.
sadly, but we won't talk about that. So yeah, I mean, I found it still disturbing because of the age difference.
Yeah.
But a little more palatable. Like I imagined that he was 18, even though he's certainly not.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know, it's like, it's just in this world, everything is about control and power, and you get the feeling that Marjorie is maybe fond of this kid.
Fonder than Joffrey.
Yeah. You know, probably in no way loves him, but it's like he's a sweet kid who's in over his head with everything going on. But at the end of the day, she's with him for a certain reason. And now the power play she's using with Cersei, with his mom, which gets disturbing again because she's purposely toying with her by talking about having sex with her son.
Well,
and basically being like, I've supplanted you because I'm like now the important woman in his life, you know?
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I think that Marjorie is a fascinating character. It's interesting because I know someone that detests her worse than anybody else on the show, which I find fascinating because it's like, really? Because they're such terrible people. But it's because she is such a skilled manipulator in the sense that she very wisely uses what is a maxim for others, which is you catch more flies with honey, you know? She knows how to woo people onto her side, which I think is...
Even Joffrey,
which I think is ultimately going to be very much more to her benefit, you know, than using fear tactics and terror. She knows how to get the people on her side and how to get Tommen on her side.
Well, that wasn't too hard to figure out.
That was an easy one for her.
Yeah.
That wasn't rough. But she's manipulating him very clearly and using, I adore your mother. Don't you think she'd be so much happier rather than going like the catty route?
Yeah.
But what I
Don't
love...
trash talk mom.
Don't you trash talk your mama. But
Yeah.
no, I love her. This is in her best interest. What I really enjoyed was the scene between the two of them because the power dynamic had so obviously shifted from last season, and she once again was using, it was sort of the girl way of fighting.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that with caution, only in the sense of, the men do it too, for sure. But the thing that you say the things that you deliver the message without saying the insult.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do I call you dowager? You're old.
Yeah.
You're done. You're out of here.
Yeah.
You're
You're the last generation. Yeah. I've come in now and
Yeah.
taken your place. And yeah, they're both very pointed what they're saying to each other, but they both know to keep appearances.
Yeah.
You know.
And anything you need.
Yeah.
There was such an air of desperation to it. I don't think she'll stay desperate for all that long. We see her sort of managing the small council until it's a small council of one, her.
The episode is called High Sparrow, so we should talk about the High Sparrow.
Let's talk about the High Sparrow. Now, these are really interesting, and we got some more nakedness here. With the Septon at the brothel playing the game of the Seven, which was, again, very disturbing.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to bring in the element of fanaticism, religious fanaticism in this world, and what that would look like in this world that's so steeped in violence.
Yeah.
And her making the very pointed choice to go, you know what, I'm going to make an ally out of you because you can help me. It's a really dangerous ally to have. This is not someone that is motivated by the things that you can control, like money and power.
But his approach is interesting too, because we've seen his followers who are pretty like intense.
Yeah.
But he has a very, I guess the idea here being that he's a religious, a person that people would want to follow and has that charisma because he gives off the air of being kind of laid back, and it's Jonathan Pryce who's played like creepy villains, but being very sort of like, I'm just here, I'm helping people, and Cersei is interesting to see her approach because she is looking for new allies and a new way in because she is losing the power she had. So maybe it's interesting to see her ally with someone who's come in and could be a threat to some people, but she's like, oh, maybe this can be someone who can help me.
Yeah, let me arm you.
Yeah.
But he does sort of, you can understand why people would follow him in the sense that he is unlike this, unlike the Septon, he's living into his word, saying, I care for the poor, we're all equal, I'm going to give you my shoes, here's some soup. You would be much more inclined if you were of a religious mind, I think, to follow this guy than the one that's a total hypocrite. Yeah. And clearly so. So it's an interesting, it adds a new flavor to the world. Speaking of the many-faced god, which we weren't, but now we are, Arya.
Arya, yeah. We got to see her kind of in this new, her training. It was not a Rocky montage training. We got to see a little bit of her new world, which is, she's kind of being given sort of the grunt works right now. She's having some issues with another young woman. She had some colorful language.
She used the C word.
You should not use the C word, but it's Arya. And that was kind of fun to see her.
Do you know who are you? You're about to find out.
I wrote down that line too. But it's kind of like right now she is getting sort of the Mr. Miyagi paint the fence.
She is getting the paint the fence treatment. Right. I've been sweeping this floor for days.
Right. Well, you just learned how to decapitate 5 people at once. Yeah.
What you'll learn soon is that's how you murder.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find the peek into this world very fascinating. Mm-hmm. The idea of truly abandoning your identity, which, as we've seen, she was mostly able to do, but she had to hang on to Needle.
Yeah, I mean, she got rid of it where she's staying, but she buried it pointedly. She did not discard of it. It's a place where she could get that sword again.
And think about the meaning of that sword. It's been her protector.
She lost it for a long time.
She lost it for a long time, but it's kept her safe. And then it was given to her, by her brother, who was the one person and the first person probably to see and accept the real her without trying to force her to be a little lady. Mm-hmm. He was like, here's your sword, go.
And then she was trained to fight with it by the first person who was really kind of like helping her in that way.
And her dad eventually allowed that and it sort of accepted that part of her.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of attachment and meaning, so it'll be interesting. That's an interesting choice for her to make in this world. I love seeing that side of it, but I do think that the idea, like the gods come up so often in these different beliefs and versions of the gods, which is not unlike our world, but the idea that like the many-faced god, there is only one God and every man knows his gift, I believe. Mm-hmm. If I'm missaying that, forgive me, but I was like, well, that's, death.
Right.
Considering what they dole out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the art she is learning.
Yes, the art of murder. Yeah. So, Pod is going to be learning some arts himself.
Yes. Pod is. Brienne was kind of trying to push him away for a while. But now,
well, she's been hurt.
She's been hurt, and in fact, we learned a lot more about that. And it's interesting when they bring up characters from the past. I think it's easy to kind of forget about Renly. He wasn't on the show that much, but to Brienne, he's someone very important.
Right.
And that was our in.
When Renly showed up, I think in season 2, a lot of people were like, "Who's that again?"
Yeah.
And they were having trouble
because they mention these characters and they do pop up, but then some are gone very quickly.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to get her reminiscing about him. A, because it brought up that character again, and B, because it was a very emotional story she told.
Yeah, it was. And I found myself, oddly enough, of everything that sort of happened in this episode, that's the one that got me. It's an interesting aspect of the show, is thinking about it, that sometimes people just telling the story of a pinnacle moment that helped make them who they are.
Yeah.
Tyrion had a moment like that with Jaime last season. This one for her told me so much about who she is and where that attachment and where that love for Renly comes from. I think obviously it's fueling that desire for vengeance, but you get it on a visceral level when you hear that kind of story. You could put yourself in her shoes of having that moment of, sort of exalted moment where you've pleased your dad and everything is possible, and then having it dashed like by cruel, mean teenagers, and then this guy came to your rescue.
Right.
I would be loyal to him forever too.
Yeah.
I might not.
And maybe have feelings for him even if he was not going to return them. Yeah. As we know that she did. Yeah.
But I'm loving her dynamic with Pod. I absolutely am. So that's some of the murder and nakedness of this week's Game of Thrones. Very little murder.
Yeah, but there was training for murder.
There was training for murder and talk of murder, which is good unto itself. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Let us know what you guys thought of this week's episode in the comments below. And where you think things are going from here. But don't do spoilers if you know where they're going.
Right. Don't be the jerk.
All right. We do have some social questions which will help us to discuss some topics. Actually, the first thing that I want to talk about that I think is pretty interesting is that a lot of people were really mad at our Khaleesi last week.
Yeah.
Which we even had a discussion about, did we think that was really sort of the smart political move? we didn't talk about Jon.
We haven't talked about Jon. We should talk about Jon.
We should definitely talk about Jon.
Yeah. Hold the social thought.
Hold the social flow.
Yeah.
Jon made a big choice this week that sort of mirrored what she did last week in terms of the execution, right? Making a choice to make a point with a public execution.
To be like, this is how I lead, this is how the rules go,
Yeah.
and this is what we're gonna follow.
Yeah, and he was in a position, as commander to exert his authority quickly and make some very pointed decisions. Now, he chose to keep his main enemy with him, and in fact give him an elevated position despite Stannis' advice to get rid of that guy.
Right, but to follow the idea that this guy, while a jerk to him and his adversary, a danger to him, is very competent, a good fighter, someone who you get the idea that Jon maybe is he might hate me, but his loyalty is to the Night's Watch, and he will fight for the Night's Watch. I've seen that for myself.
Yeah.
But this other guy...
And it was a political decision, I think, too. It's sort of when...
Because that guy had a lot of followers.
That guy had a lot of followers, and it's well, I'm not creating a war here. I'm still going to give him a position of power, and let's all work together, sort of an idea, which is a smart political move in a lot of ways. But then when he is openly defied...
Yeah, and someone's saying, I will not do what you asked me to.
Yeah, then he, as his father taught him to do, beheaded the man himself and sort of said to everybody, I am the commander. We are actively in a time of war, despite what anybody may understand of what's going on. I know the dangers that we're facing. You can't argue with my orders.
Right.
There's just no question. And I will say that as a viewer, I felt in line with Stannis with a little nod, yes, that was the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah. No, I did. I definitely did. It was, I think, important that, like you mentioned, he did it himself, like his father, which is one of the very first scenes of the show. Yeah. It's you don't make someone else do this thing. Own it yourself.
And that was a deserter.
Right. Own it yourself. If you are sentencing this man to death, you do it yourself. It's your responsibility. And at the same time, it kind of puts the foot down, obviously, in a huge way, saying, look, this is what happens. You have to follow my order. We know Jon is not a cruel person, is not looking to it's, is not looking to be a tyrant, but at the same time needs people to be loyal. And yeah, I liked how they played it, because when he paused, when the guy was begging for his life, I was like, I'm a coward. They make you think maybe he's just going to let him go and say, get out of here.
Mercy.
But it's nope. And you kind of know, I think the idea was in his mind, he probably for a second did think about it. Oh, should I let him go? And then he's like, no, I can't.
And he really couldn't, especially at that point. He couldn't have taken it that far and then backed off.
Yeah, especially because this is his first test as a leader. It's this is really, everyone's going to look how he handles this. And while he might get a few people saying, oh, he did the right thing, too many people would have been like, no, he's weak. Even if they were glad he didn't kill the guy, they still might think oh, he's weak.
Exactly, and he's already in a vulnerable position, and he can't afford to be in a more vulnerable position. And honestly, for the sake of his men, he can't afford to have them arguing with his orders,
right? Because
they are in very vulnerable positions. He needs them to do what he tells them to do.
Yeah.
Now leaving comments.
Now,
what you think of the show.
And there will be a connection here.
And there will be a connection very shortly.